my name is Sonya Shelton. I live in Los Angeles and I am an entrepreneur. I have two businesses, the CEO of Executive Leadership Consulting, helping organizations align their strategy and their culture. And then I also am the president of Center of the Seven Rays, where I teach mystery school teachings and do healings and all things spiritual.
Well, thank you, Sonya, for taking a moment to sit down with me. It sounds like you have so many things on your plate, which we will definitely get into. But first, let me ask you, what do you think people's first impression of you is?
I think most people see that I have a lot of energy, that I am a very intense listener. So I have a lot of people will just spill everything about their life because people aren't used to having someone just be present with them. And so I find out things about people in just a few minutes of meeting with them that people that they've known for years don't know.
That's awesome. So you have this energy and people just open up to you and share.
Right.
I love that. Yeah, you have a very inviting aura about you, even just over our email communications and now just over video. So I'm excited to hopefully meet you in person one of these days in LA. I just live north of you in Thousand Oaks. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So you talked in your introduction about having a couple of businesses, and then you talked about the healing teachings that you do. So I want to start with the businesses. Have you always been entrepreneurial? Was there something that drove you? Were you like the kid with the lemonade stand? Like what's going on?
I was actually not. My parents were entrepreneurs. So I grew up in a family of business owners where dinner conversation was all about work. And I swore when I was a teenager that I was never going to go into business. I never wanted to have anything to do with business. I wanted to be completely opposite my parents. And then I realized how much I really learned in listening to them and having those conversations, and even being, little jobs when I was growing up, being involved in the business a little bit. I just learned so much about leadership that I think I just received by osmosis. So then when as I got older, realized that was just in my blood.
So what kind of business did your parents have?
They actually started out selling office machines and were one of the first companies to sell personal computers. So I actually learned how to use a computer when I was like 12 years old. And they just said, because I was very curious and also kind of annoying, I think, as a kid because of my curiosity. So literally my mom gave me the manual and said, go learn this during a spring break, thinking, and I did, right? And so then I became their like poster child of how easy it is. Like if our 12-year-old daughter can do it, you can do it.
That is hysterical. I love it. She's like, here, go keep yourself busy, AKA stop bothering me. Right. Oh, wait.
Right. Exactly.
So then what businesses did you start?
So I think I started out more entrepreneurial, working for smaller companies, right? So my first education is in magazine journalism. So I actually started out working for rock and roll magazines, which today, working more in management consulting, people are always shocked by and have that same look that you just gave me. Right? And so, and then I always say, I'm still a rocker chick at heart. So even though it wasn't, a business that I started, it was a business that I felt very passionately about and was involved in it at the beginning. So it kind of felt like my business when I first started out.
Very cool. So that leadership drive in you has been there since listening to your parents around the dinner table. How do you think that helped you growing up?
I think it helped me see other people's perspective, and also, I heard a lot of complaining about people that worked for them, right? So of course they're probably going to have more of the confidential conversations at home rather than in the office. And so I heard a lot more about some of the team issues and things that they were dealing with when, if they were having challenges. Those were usually the conversations I heard. So it was more about me understanding how to lead people, and I didn't really realize it until I started working in organizations, how much I did learn from them and what great leaders they were.
What a good skill set though to have, because I think in business, especially when you're an employee, I think a lot of times there's tunnel vision involved, right? Where it's my job, my scope, my space, anything outside of that, I don't want to know, I don't know, it doesn't affect me, but in reality it does. And so you from a young age saw that umbrella and bird's eye view where you could encompass everything and kind of take a step back, like you said, and get everyone's perspective and see how all the cogs work together.
Right, exactly. And I think that's why, from the time I was in high school, like every job I had, I quickly moved into a management position. And I think that that's why, is because I could see the bigger picture. I could see things that needed to be done. And I just stepped into it when I thought there was a problem rather than asking for permission. So.
Do you think that those skills translate into your personal relationships too, in communicating with others?
I think so. I think, as I mentioned, I've always been curious, right? So even as a kid, I was curious. And so I tend to ask a lot of questions. And I think it has its pluses and minuses, right? So I ask a lot of questions because I'm genuinely curious about the other person. They don't always ask me questions. So sometimes it tends to be a one-way conversation. But one of the things that I've noticed is because people so rarely get that, is that they think I'm really interesting, even though they don't really know anything about me because of the questions I ask.
What is something that would surprise people to know about you?
That usually what's surprising to people is that is my background in music, right? So because I work with a lot of corporations, and then doing healing, and to say, to that I'm a rocker chick at heart, right? And like some of the music that I listen to, and people are like, kind of, that's weird. Like that doesn't quite match like everything that you do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that would be surprising to me too. Yeah. I can see where people would be surprised by that. Don't you find it interesting that, like you said, and we're going to touch on this in just a minute, the spiritual work that you do, don't you find it interesting people's perception of a person that is in that space and holds that space for themselves? They can't possibly like all this hardcore stuff. They can't possibly do XYZ. That it's categorized and lumped into this stereotype, right?
So I've always, I would say probably starting in my early 20s, been very spiritually curious and really use spirituality as a core of who I am. And I've been practicing Zen Buddhism for about 25 years now. And I teach in that tradition as well. And I've had clients, like even in the corporate environment, where they're like, well, I want to come see you at the Zen Center and kind of see how you are there. And I'm like, I am there how I am here, right? But you're right. There's like, and not only the music I listen to, but the consulting work that I do, it's like, how can you be spiritual and consult with these big companies? That doesn't make sense. And I've always felt like the way, if you want to change the world, you go where the power is. And the corporations have a lot of power, right? And so to bring light into those spaces, not only can change people and their work situation, but it actually can, I believe, can ultimately change the world.
I love that. That is so amazingly true, I think, too, because it's like you said, it's like, I don't understand how you can be spiritual, but the reality is you're going there to teach these people how to be present. And like you said, I think you put it perfectly, is to bring light into these organizations. And you really are enlightening people to the possibility, right?
Right, exactly.
And so tell me how you got into doing that part of what you said in your introduction. Tell me how you got into consulting on the spiritual aspect for some of these businesses and that other part of your life.
Yeah, so I would say the spiritual aspects that I bring into organizations, they don't even know, right? So So I come in and help them solve business problems or people problems with their teams, bringing that light, but they don't necessarily know that it comes from a spiritual background. So several years ago, I wrote a book called You're an Executive, but Are You a Leader? And I was talking to my Zen teacher about the book when it came out, and someone overheard and they said, "Oh, did you write a book about Zen?" And I said no, and my teacher said yes. Right. And he was like, it's just part of who you are, like your spirituality. And there's so many deep spiritual teachings in your leadership consulting that people don't even realize how much you're sharing. Right. So it's sort of infused into it.
Having that all incorporated into one and into your teachings, even though it's not direct and subtle, bringing that light and that perspective. Talk about how that makes someone a better leader.
Yeah, so I'm all about alignment, right? From the personal individual to the team, to the organization, and even trans organizations. So working across organizations, companies working with suppliers, or nonprofits working with each other, and it's all about creating that alignment, starting with who you are and being authentic and bringing your whole self to work, and that's one of the things that I've learned, right? Is, I used to keep my work life and my spiritual life very separate. And I had a great professor when I did my master's degree say, what if you brought these things together and really brought your whole self to your work, right? And that was very powerful for me. So now that I work with other people, it's looking at that too. Like how can they show up at work being authentically who they are, and bringing all of their gifts and strengths into that situation. And that leadership allows them to model it for others to be who they are. Because we spend so much time at work, we should be fulfilled there, right? Like we should feel like we're fulfilling our purpose in the work that we do.
I think you said it perfectly too earlier when you said that the person that you were working with said, I want to come see you at the Zen Center and see how you are there. Like it was two separate people, but you are just one, and you are as present in your role at work as you are at the Zen Center and in your spirituality, because you are one and you are one being, and you are able to be so present in all of your space. And I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is important. And I think that I think it's more and more we're seeing in not just in corporations, but in society where people are recognizing that it's safe for them to be who they are, and they have support to be who they are, and just allow people to see them, right?
Yep. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier in being authentic and overall acceptance and the curiosity that you and I both share for other human beings, right? And I think that's a thing, is the no judgment and letting go of all that fear. And so you come into whether it's a meeting or a party in your personal life, and you come in with almost a mask on, right? And you're not presenting who you really are, because you're either afraid of judgment, afraid of something not going well, afraid of feeling awkward, or at work, afraid of failing. And I think if we can let go of all those fears, our authentic self comes up, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. People think that they'll be respected more if they're all buttoned up, right? And it actually makes people intimidated and more uncomfortable when you come across that way, right? It's really about just being a real person.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartly. Well, I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me and taking the time. You've talked about all of your journey to consulting, the spirituality. You talked about your book. Tell people where they can get the book.
It's available on Amazon. It's called You're an Executive, but Are You a Leader? And if you want to learn more about our consulting, it's executiveleader.com.
That's awesome. Well, before I ask you my final question to close out our conversation, is there anything that you feel that people should know about you that I might have missed?
Yeah, I think you did a great job at asking me questions. You got into things I usually don't even share with people. So
then let me ask you, as you are going around your world whether it's consulting, whether it's at the Zen Center or working on another book or just at a party, if there's a sign you could hold up that said one thing about Sonya, what would you want people to know about you?
Let's see, what would I want? I think that it's around compassion, right? So I would say that's my number one value in how I want to show up for people and how I think we can show up for each other. So that's that I would say the most important thing to me.